All right, high schoolers, it's time for Truth Time. And today we're going to do a one-off series called I Have Questions, and we're talking about arguing. So you guys are in the midst of maybe the most argumentative season I've ever known, right? This election, the trauma and the cultural wars going on right now. There's so much arguing, and it's so great. It's nuts. Like, you guys, you don't need me to tell you, but it's nuts. One thing, though, that I want to tell you is that arguing can be good. So the word argue, don't immediately think this terrible thing that we should never do. No, arguing can be good when done right. In fact, when done right, it can help both parties find truth. If I'm arguing with you, if we're doing it right, we're both sitting side by side trying to get at what is actually real here. What's reality? What is true? So if you have your scribe pads, write that down. Arguing can be good. But I'd also say this, that 98% of the time, arguing is done in a way that dishonors God. When you guys go on the internet, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, like it's TikTok reels, I'm getting so many political ads. You see arguing that I would say dishonors God. They use words like this idiot, right? They're an idiot. They're so dumb. They're so radical. Don't believe a single word, blah, blah, all these divisive words just being thrown around and lashed out. And I would say that that is arguing that is done in a way that dishonors God. Now, if I wasn't a Christian, then those words are totally fine to use, right? I'm not a Christian, and like that guy I think is an idiot, so I use the word idiot for him, right? Well, as Christians, we believe that that's tearing someone down, and more so than that, we feel like it's tearing down God, tearing down the image of God in that person. Now, when I say image of God, you guys are probably like, okay, I've heard it before, but I want to show you a video of what it means to be an image of God. So sit back, relax. Well, actually, pay attention. Write down in your scribe pads. We're going to learn about the image of God.
So if you lived in ancient Bible times, odds are you lived under the authority of a king.
And many of these kings claimed that they were gods, and they would even call themselves the image of God.
Meaning they had authority to tell people what to do, order things to be made.
Yeah, they got to define good and evil. And these kings would often make statues of themselves, which in Hebrew were called tselem, often translated as idol or image.
But for Israel, they didn't view their kings as the God. In fact, they were never supposed to even make images of God.
It's exactly right, and that was really unique for that time and culture. This is rooted, first of all, in Israel's belief that you can't reduce the creator God down to any one thing in creation. But there's another reason. People aren't to make images of God because God has already made images of himself.
When did he do that?
Well, let's go to page 1 of the Bible. And the first person we meet there is God. He's the one with authority over all creation. He speaks and creation obeys, and he defines what is good and not good. In other words, he alone is king. But then surprisingly, as the pinnacle of all of God's creative work, he makes humans, and he calls all of them the image of God.
So he gives all humans the authority to rule.
Exactly, that's what he goes on to say. He tells the humans to subdue the earth and to rule it. And so this task that once belonged only to elite kings is here in the Bible the task of every human being. This was a revolutionary statement in its day because all humans are being called to rule and to participate in the human project.
So what does this mean? I mean, how are we all supposed to rule?
So the picture we get in Genesis is gardening.
Gardening?
Yes. Gardening. So they rule the earth by cultivating it, by harnessing all of the earth's raw potential and then making something more and new out of it.
So growing food for each other.
Yes, but that also includes growing families then, which become neighborhoods, and then they create communities where people are going to work and take care of each other and build businesses and cities that will expand to new places and so on.
So ruling is really the day-to-day acts of our work and creativity.
Yes, we take the world somewhere. This is humanity's divine and sacred task.
Yeah, and this all sounds really nice. And humans have designed some pretty great things. But just as often we create things that cause a lot of suffering and and a lot of injustice. So maybe we shouldn't actually be ruling.
Yeah, so the Bible addresses this. In Genesis, what happens is that God gives humans a choice about how they're going to rule. So are they going to use their authority for the benefit of others, which is God's definition of good, or are they going to turn away and define good and evil for themselves and use their authority for self-advantage?
And in the story, they choose to define good and evil on their own terms.
And so this is the Bible's depiction of the human condition. So sometimes we pull off amazingly good stuff, but just as often, despite our best intentions, we act selfishly and we create evil in the world.
And so we're stuck as mediocre rulers making a mess of things.
But that's not the end of the story. So the Bible goes on and it makes this claim that all of this was resolved when God bound himself to humanity through Jesus. And he showed us what it looks like to truly rule as a human.
So what does it look like?
Well, Jesus ruled by serving and by seeking the best for others, by putting himself underneath them and loving not just his friends, but also his enemies.
And that's not a typical way to rule.
And not only that, Jesus confronted the consequences of all of the evil and the death that we have created by our messed up ways of ruling. And he takes it. I mean, he lets it kill him. And so when the New Testament writers looked back to Jesus' resurrection, they see a whole new future opening up for all humanity.
Jesus is a new way to be human.
Yeah, that's why they called Jesus the image of God, or the new human. And not only that, they also believe that Jesus' divine life and power is now available to heal and to transform us to become our life and power.
And this sounds really nice, but what does it really look like?
So practically, the Apostle Paul said it looks like people being filled by Jesus' own presence and spirit, filled with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and integrity and gentleness and self-control. He says this is the new humanity that God wants to create in us so that we become people in whom God's image is being restored, people who will move the human project forward. And that's actually how the story of the Bible ends. It's a renewed world where God is on his throne and his servants are all around him, but they're the ones ruling over this new world, taking it into new, uncharted territory with Jesus as their healer and their guide.
Awesome. So what you guys learned is that we are all made in the image of God. We're all made to represent God to everyone, right? And we have the power to make things happen either on our own terms or on God's terms. So when we argue, we have the power to do it God's way or our own way. You can write that down. When we argue, we have the power to do it God's way or our way. This next slide is going to come in crucial. It's this. In God's kingdom, it's defined by things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are the fruits of the Spirit. But when we do it our own way, man's kingdom, we don't build people up, which is called a blessing. We tear people down, which is called cursing. Remember, and whatever we do to the least of these, whatever we do to anyone, we do it unto God. So when there's hate, anger, tension, anxiety, slander, malice, unfaithfulness, boasting, lashing out, that's man's way. That's how the world, I mean, go on social media, this is what you get. How often do you get this? You get this because when man does his own way, he tears people down. When man is in arguments with other men, and man means humanity, so man and woman. When we get in arguments, this is our tendency, man. We go for the knockout punches. You are the worst. You hate everyone. You're dumb. How could anyone ever listen to you? And they come back and do the same thing. Well, no one should ever listen to you because you believe this and this. And what rational person would ever believe this? Boom. Hate, anger, tension, slander, unfaithfulness, boasting. I'm the greatest. You're the worst. Boom. That is man's kingdom. That is the human condition, man. That's what I do sometimes. We all default to this. But man, what is the harder choice? The harder choice is this: to say, hey, God, you know what? I think you know more than I do. And you say that this builds up the world, not this. So as Christians, if this isn't coming out of our mouths, then we are not following God, right? And this is tough because lots of people do not like Christianity because most Christians fall into these categories. My plea to you is examine yourself, okay? Examine your own posts. Examine your arguments with each other. Is this what's happening or is this what's happening, okay? Because this is of God and this is not of God. It's a tough message, but a very crucial one. So questions like, how do you argue without doing this? That's what I want you to talk in your small groups. And to do so, we're going to be reading all of James 3. So James, to give you some context, and you leaders, you can start handing out the I have thoughts analysis. All of James is, for context, he is the writer and he's the brother of Jesus, stepbrother of Jesus. He did not believe in Jesus, did not believe Jesus was God until later in his life. And he speaks to people because he believes that people aren't putting into practice what Christianity says. He thinks that people aren't actually following the ways of God, love, joy, peace, patience. He only sees slander, malice, deceit. So James talks about the tongue. What can you do with it? You can do good or you can do evil. Which way are you going to choose? Go ahead and read James 3, all of it, and fill out that sheet and have a great discussion. Guys, we'll see you next week.